Max and mute up real quick. You're muted, Queen. You're muted, Queen. Just to let you know.
Thank you, because I was going in. All right. Happy Sunday. Welcome, kings and queens. Today, we are talking men and mental health, and the men are here to share their personal journey, be it directly or indirectly, just about mental health and the stigma around mental health when it comes to men and mental health. So, we invite you to be active participants in the chat. If you have questions for the guys, they're going to be taking questions. It's just going to be a really good conversation today. We know those Sunday scaries are real. As you tee up for the work week, sometimes you have a lot of that anxiety, that stress. These guys are going to help you deal with that. They're going to talk about how they've maybe overcome anxiety, depression, and/or stress. Some coping skills they've used, maybe physical activity, prayer, meditation, whatever it is, right? But they are here. So we got Daryl Long in the building.
Thank you for having me, Queen. I love the palace. I love being here. Thank you.
All right. We got Khalid, Honorable Khalid in the house today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Look
You are
forward to
more
meeting
than
the panel
welcome,
with
my friend.
so many great people. So,
We got Jackson in the house today.
Good afternoon, Queen, Kings. Thank you for having me back. Glad to
Absolutely,
share some time with you
absolutely.
again.
And we got Franks in the house. Chauncey Franks. Chauncey, hello.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, it's great to be back and excited to meet these fellas and spend some time together. So thank you.
Absolutely welcome. So I don't want to delay the show. I know we only have everybody for a short period of time. Gentlemen, I want to get this party started. When you hear the term mental health, what comes to mind? And keep it real. What comes to mind? Who wants to take this first?
I think for me, Queen Sheba, what comes to mind automatically is shunning. Black men have been shunned by other black men, by the community, until not really vocalizing how we feel, vocalizing what we're going through, vocalizing our hurt, our pain, our failures sometimes, our disappointments in ourselves, our disappointments in the communities around us and how it impact us, the relationships that we have and how it impact us. Sometimes there might be pressure at work. There's so many different things that black men deal with, and I haven't even gotten to the the cultural. Let me make sure I say this right. The culture that we have here in America and how it impedes on black men mental health as well. I don't want to say racism or um, institutionalized racism, but those things also affect the black family, which affects the black men. So ultimately, when I think about black mental health from the community standpoint, I think that we don't talk about it enough, and we shun each other too much. We make jokes out of it too much. So I think it's a big joke to the black community, to be perfectly honest.
Wow. I think that could sum it up for a lot of people. The fact that we do not talk about it enough. Franks, Chauncey Franks, what are your thoughts when you hear the term mental health?
If you'd asked me that 5 years ago, I think I would have had a almost kind of like a man. I don't really want to go down this road, but I think now with much education that is pouring into this particular topic, so many different things come to mind. I think of my own mental health. I think of, hey, where's my wife and her mental health? Where are my kids for mental health? I think of the student athletes that I work with and their mental health, their trauma, their life experience, what they are bringing in. Oftentimes, if I see something happen on the news, I see an individual, I question, hey, what was that individual's mental health? What was something that they were dealing with? My daughter and I was walking on a trail this morning, and a gentleman just came out of the woods, and you know, obviously homeless. And my daughter was kind of afraid, and she's like, "Well, Daddy, how did he get there?" And we begin to talk about mental health, and so there's a lot of tentacles when I hear the word mental health. But in some ways, I'm hopeful because I feel like we're at a place in our society where we are talking about this topic a whole lot more.
Hopeful. I love that. Hopeful. Jackson, what comes to your mind when you hear the term mental health? What pops up for you?
Brother Frank just said mental. I mean, the hopeful part and the tentacles, talking about how so many things feed into your mental health. So my initial thought on it is protection, as in protecting mine, because I feel like we as a society, not whether black, white, or whatever, we've allowed social media and public opinion to guide what we think and how we behave so much. So some of the stuff that's put out there, if you ingest it via social media or however regular media, it has the opportunity to fracture your mental health. So my initial thought is protecting my mental health because my previous profession gave me the opportunity to see how quickly someone's mental health can spiral down and out of control.
Yeah.
And just for sakes of sharing with the audience, if you're comfortable, do you mind sharing what your previous profession was when you think back to your
Well,
previous
yeah,
profession?
most recently, I was in law enforcement for 10 years. And so that gave me an opportunity to actually see people at their worst. And sometimes, very seldom as an officer, do you get to experience the best of people because 9 times out of 10, when you're being called in a crisis situation, any type, I mean, and the crisis for one is, may not be anything for the other person, but generally when you're dealing with law enforcement, you're in some type of crisis situation aside from maybe a traffic stop or something like that. So I didn't get the opportunity to see the best of people on a daily basis. So that's where I'm speaking from that experience.
Yeah, thank you. I think it hits home a little bit differently having someone on the panel to say, hey, as a former law enforcement professional, we don't always get to see you at your best. And as a result, that's going to impact not only us, but you in some ways. So thank you for sharing that. Honorable Khalid, when it comes to the term mental health, what comes to your mind, King?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the war inside. You know, everybody has their battles, everybody has their trials. And more often than not, the reason that we lose is because of lack of preparation and lack of education. In our community, specifically, when we talk about Black people, even though mental health is becoming a more popular topic, so many of us were shunned away from getting real healing. You know, if you suggest somebody goes to therapy, they'll turn their nose up at you as if, they're too good for it, or, you hear the popular term, I'm not crazy. When, in reality, a lot of these people are able to give you some insight to how to heal properly, how to deal with the ups and the downs of life. And so many of us kind of run away from those things. So, yeah, the first thing that I think of is just the war inside that so many people are battling and just don't know how to fight.
That's deep. And that's real, though. That's real life. That's a real life situation, right? Suffering in silence. You walked me right into my next question, which would be, and gentlemen, feel free to answer this question. If you feel like you've had personal experience directly or indirectly, does therapy work? Why or why not? Who wants to take this first?
I'll give my. I believe it works if taken seriously, if regularity is involved. Um, Therapy can be a scary process. Um, I liken our issues as people to like having a bunch of jack in the boxes on the floor. We tend to pack away issues, especially as men in particular. We're good at compartmentalizing. We don't let our feelings show. We stuff it away. We put it away, and often we don't never intend to go back and deal with it. We just put it away because we see it as a weakness. So we're trying to get rid of that. So we stuff it away. So I liken it to like just putting that problem in a jack in a box. And so you just imagine a room full of jack in the boxes wound up in different positions and stuff like that. You don't know when it's going to pop up. You don't know when that clown is going to pop up or when that issue is going to pop out the box. And so your health itself is at risk day in, day out, because you just don't know what's going to pop up in your past, especially, being prior law enforcement, prior military, you did. And I'm sure all of us had things in our past that, we've packed away, probably never want to visit it again. So I think that's the scary part about therapy. is not knowing what you're going to dig up from your past. So, but I'll be honest. I recently started therapy myself because I'm at the stage in life. It's like I want to know what's keeping me from certain objectives and stuff like that. And I feel like I've exhausted the means that I have as an individual. So I'm trying to see, because you think as a person, when you do it, self-preservation, all the tactics that you learn is how to protect yourself, I believe. And so I'm just looking for a different perspective. So that's how.
Wow. That's honorable.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you. Daryl, I think you wanted to jump in there. I'll come back to the other gentleman in just a second. What are your thoughts? Does therapy work? Why or why not? What is your reason for your answer?
In my personal experience with therapy, it absolutely does work. I think the thing is, Queen Sheba, is when you're in therapy and you're self-reflecting, the question is are you going to come out that situation making the same choices, or are you going to actually step into these solutions that you might be uncomfortable with, right? So let me tell you one of mine, real like really personal stuff. Because I went through therapy recently for stuff that I was going through, and I think you know what I'm talking about without me having to allude to it. And I went to therapy, and one of the things that my therapist said was, "There, I think that you have a problem with being alone." She said it about a year ago. She said, "You got rid of this woman that you claimed you was about to marry, and then you replaced her immediately. What did that do for you?" I said, "Nothing. Nothing. I didn't even have sex with the girl." Exactly, because mentally and physically and spiritually, you're not here, but you're using this relationship to get over the last one. That's not healthy. You need to learn how to be alone. You have a big family, you have a good support system. Why do you always feel the need to have somebody in your bed? And that's when like after that, I took this oath of abstinence, right? To not have sex, to date intentionally, um, and do other things that, to be honest, originally I was uncomfortable with, and I really didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? So it got to a point where I had to start asking myself, do I want what I really want? Do I want a wife? Do I want my children to look at me as a husband, not just a father, but somebody who they can mold themselves behind in every fashion? And if I really want that, I have to change. I have to admit that the stuff I've been doing is not right. No matter how much I want to tell myself, you're the best dad, you're the best man possible, I wasn't. So that was one of the first things I had to look at. Like I had to look at myself and say, the man that I am today is not superior. He's inferior. He's weak. And until I purge myself of some of these emotional responses um and the need to not be alone, maybe I won't get the right results. So now, because a lot of people ask me like, why you celibate, all these different things. That's the reason why. Because I went to therapy, and that was one of the things that they suggested. Don't have sex. Don't date unless you are dating for marriage, because you know that that's what you want. So that's if that's where if that's what the therapist told me, that's the advice I should have took. And if I didn't, Queen Sheba, I would say therapy don't work because people, they get exposed to what they should do, and the solutions are not comfortable. It never really is, and they don't want to do it. It's easy to go back to sleeping with women every single day. It really is. It's hard to learn the lessons that that God has meant for me during this abstinence. And it's, yeah, even right now it's hard. I'm in Detroit right now, so it's easy. You know what I mean? But if if I don't take these lessons and apply it to my life, then I'll always be in the same cyclical depression, and I don't want that.
I got to pause on that one because I love the real life happens, right, to real people. And gentlemen, I'm pausing for a second because Daryl threw something in. I'm just going to pivot for a second, then I'm going to come back to the initial question. Men, based on what you know, or men you know, or where you used to be in life, or where you currently are, do men use sex as therapy? One by one. If you want to answer, feel free to jump in, and you can elaborate, or you can just say yes or no.
Absolutely.
All right.
I don't
I
even
would
need
say
that.
yes and no, depending on it depends on what the individual needs are. I mean, some of us equate sex to being a lot more than it really is. I mean, if you put the bottom line out there, sex might be 20 minutes to 40 if you're good and stuff. And and then after the fact, I mean, what's left? I mean, I've known people to act like sex is this great thing every time they have it. Like, okay, and this is maybe it's just me. Like, this is really just the same old sex. I mean, it's like we place too much value on it, and I think that's where it could probably be used from a therapeutic standpoint because it's just sex. I mean, I honor the brother for having the discipline to be abstinent. I mean, to be able to abstain from it and stuff like that. But my situation is almost the opposite of his, where he was concerned about being alone. I worry that I'm too comfortable being alone at times because it's like I've been down this path more than once or twice. So it's like I hope I don't overvalue my peace because I use it as my reason for being alone sometimes, and my life really is very peaceful when I'm not in a relationship. So it's like I'll take peace over a bad relationship any day, over a bad marriage or a bad girlfriend. So it's like I'd say yes and no on the sex part.
All right. Franks.
I think it goes to the individual. I mean, I think we all have something in our lives that we'll turn to, to help us cope. That can be food, that can be, shopping, and that can be sex. And so I think there's a little bit of all of us something in us that we'll try to, to hold, for a wound or pain that we're dealing with. I think we'll turn to different things. So I don't know if we can necessarily put it all upon sex. I mean, I think sex for men oftentimes is something regardless of how we're feeling. That's just something we desire strongly, something needs. So happy, sad, good or bad, it's just a part of who we are, our DNA.
Okay. And with that being said, I want you to double down on therapy. In your opinion, does therapy work? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think therapy definitely work. I mean, I think it's I don't know if there's one thing that just fits all. When you're dealing with mental health, I think it's part of the healing process and part of the road of recovery or part of the road of self-discovery. I think therapy is great with helping unearth trauma, maybe helping you unearth different life experiences, disappointments, or hurt and pain. And so I think therapy is a very healthy practice that I've benefited from in my own personal life. But I think it's a part of therapy along with other items that can really help a person mental health.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Kali, what are your thoughts when it comes to therapy? Does it work? Why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think therapy works. And I agree with pretty much what all of the brothers had to say. Um, I think sometimes therapy may not work for people because they are solely reliant on going and speaking to someone instead of actually taking action, holding themselves accountable, and changing their lifestyle. I always, on my channel, I always talk about therapy as being one of the steps to healing. And it's a good step because it allows you to put a face to the enemy. So you can, through talking to someone who is a professional, they may be able to point out certain areas of your life where you can improve. And at that point, it's upon you and that therapist to lay down steps that you plan on taking to overcome some of those issues. So I do think therapy works. I just don't think it's the be all end all to healing.
That's good. I got another question about that coming up soon. Now, so we're talking about therapy. Does it work? Does it not work? Because therapy is a taboo subject, in my opinion, in the Black community. Number one, because of the money. I'm not going to pay nobody no money. A lot of that hoopla, right? The price of therapy. And also, we tend to associate a therapist and or a counselor with being crazy. And most people, what I found, they're not committed to being crazy. So I'm not crazy. I don't need a therapist. Maybe you do. With that being said, and based on some of the things that you've shared about each of you utilizing a therapist, when it comes to therapies, when it comes to therapy, who do you prefer to have as your therapist, a man or a woman, and why? Jackson.
I don't have a preference, honestly, because it just depends on how well they can communicate with me and bring my issues forward. Uh, when I recently started, I mean, I was my first therapist, or the first person who did probably my initial eval, I'll say, was appeared to be a gay white male. And I will tell you, initially at the beginning of the session, I was a bit apprehensive, but by the end of it, it didn't matter. And I feel like it's the same way. It would be the same way with whether it's a straight male or a woman, as long as they can communicate my needs and get me to understand where I'm trying to go with my issue, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. I love how you said, apprehension is normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want people to feel like, because it's like dating. Picking and choosing the right therapist is similar to dating. It could be a deal breaker whether or not we get that second session or that third or fourth session.
Right.
So I love how you said initially you were apprehensive, but by the end of the date, it was all right.
Session. It wasn't a date.
By the end of this session, I'm sorry. Well, by the end of this session, it was all right. It was.
I mean, because he was addressing stuff that some of the questions that I had. So that's why I think it. And I get maybe that lands to how open you are as an individual, who works best for you.
Franks, do you have a preference when it comes to your therapist, male or female? Why?
No, I mean, I've benefited from both. I just think different seasons, different stages, and different things that may have been going through required. It might have been a male that I need in that season. There's also been women therapists that have helped me as well too. So I think the biggest thing is just the person that you can be transparent and honest to. I think therapy works when we're transparent, when we're able to have a place that we trust that individual and just open up. It's a journey and not a quote unquote, quick fix. I mean, it takes a lot just to even, I think, get a therapist up to speed when you're trying to unpack 20, 30, 40 years of your life, in an hour session. So it's going to take, several opportunities of sitting down with that therapist to be able to help them to understand where you at and where you're coming from and just what has brought you to your current situation.
I'm not quick enough, but you deserve a round of applause for that. You really do, if I could find it, because that is the number one reason that most people do not go to therapy. Having to tell my story, especially when I've never even talked about it. How in the hell am I going to unload all of this that I've never processed? And when I say I'm not talking about me. I'm just saying in general how most people think, and that's probably one of the number one reasons most people opt out of going to therapy, because there's just so much to tell. Where do I start? Do I start with my childhood? Do I start with what's going on my job? Do I start with being my girl? Do I start with the kids? Do I start with the recent passing of a loved one? Where the hell do I start? Because it's all has impacted me. And research shows that.
Involved.
Huh?
There's a lot of courage involved with therapy. Yeah. Just picking up the phone to make the initial appointment, it requires courage within to realize you need the help and to take that step.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that. I was about to say, research shows that it takes the average person 10 years to pick up that phone.
Wow. Maybe more.
Maybe longer. 10 years. And I'm pretty sure that when they did that study, I don't think they were talking about Black folks. So imagine the spectrum and the measurement of the time frame it takes Black people to pick up a phone. That's a lot that people are carrying and dealing with. So keep that in mind when you go to work tomorrow, because you never know what folks are dealing with. Daryl, what are your thoughts?
I think at this stage of my life, Queen, it really don't matter. But while I was sitting here, I was thinking about like the young man that I was working with, the young men that we were working with in Lansing and even now in Detroit now. I think they should have men specifically. The younger men, I think they should have men. It made me think about, he's not a therapist, but he basically is in this area. His name is Jason Wilson. And I got a chance to re-speak with him because the church is right down the street that I met him at. And now he's like a spiritual leader. He has a dojo here in Detroit called it's a Muslim word, Cave Adullam, where they teach young boys about mental health, about crying at the right time, about expressing themselves to their peers, et cetera, so we cannot fight and harm each other and potentially delete each other. But to answer your question directly, at this age of my life, I don't feel like it would matter. I've had white women. I've had black men. My last therapist was a black woman, and I did pick her out specifically. Um, but it doesn't matter to me the gender at this age of my life because I'm a man. But as Frederick Douglass says, it's easier to build young boys than to fix broken men.
Mm.
So I think that it'd be easier for young men to listen to a Chauncey, to listen to a Jackson, even myself or a Khalid, and for them to really to learn some things that they really might not listen to, especially young black boys from ghetto areas. I want to make that clear. I'm talking about those black boys specifically. I think they would. I think the message would resonate from Chauncey, myself, Khalid, Jackson, and other men instead of women. To be honest,
Speaking of Chauncey, real quick, because Daryl just hit the nail on the head. I don't think you told them who you work with. I think that'll be very beneficial to this conversation. Just the fact that he's talking about young men, especially black men from all demographics of the world. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the demographic you work with before I go
Yeah,
to Khalid?
yeah. So, two quick thoughts. Yes, so I work on the campus of TCU. I serve as the student athlete, oversee this a ministry called Fellowship Christian Athletes there. So, chaplain for the TCU football team, and also chaplain for the student athletes there at TCU. And so, work with all those athletes, black, white, Hispanic, overseas kids. You get a chance to mental health is something we're consistently learning, consistently educating ourselves on. And I love what you said about Jason Wilson. I was reading his book earlier this year,
cry
and
like a man.
yes, and man, and somebody had put on the chat here trauma that black men have experienced. And man, when you look at our history, I mean, people of color have lived under trauma for so long, you know what I mean? And so when you go back and then when you start working your way forward, you see just how from one generation of broken family and trauma and the heartbreaks and the pain that black people have experienced, that it passes on. And so even to this day, and Jason talks about that, just his broken father and his stepdad and just his father's father and his father and just how their experience and abuse that they experienced was passed on from generation to generation. And so I think, just to say this last point, I think our mental health and trauma that we have experienced, I think someone in someone's lineage has to make the decision to break the chain of curse. Someone has to do the hard work, the therapy, the pain, unearth the life disappointment to break the chain. Because if you don't, then it just keeps going from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next.
That's good stuff. Y'all are really, thank you. And I'm going to Khalid, but I want you men to think about this when you talk about the impacts that a lot of men take, especially black men. I want to ask you a real deep question. Don't answer this yet. Be thinking about it. A lot of men attribute their heartbreak and their emotional distress to their mothers. Hold that thought. Khalid, when it comes to preference, do you have a preference when it comes to a therapist, man, woman, white, black, and why?
No, I don't have a preference at this point in my life. I'm kind of at a point now when it comes to therapy that I go to work out specific issues that I have a little bit of clarity to understand that I have. And so I the preference that I would have in a therapist is to seek out someone who specializes in those areas. But for so many people who they can feel inside that something is wrong, but you may not have the insight to actually know what it is. I would just try to find someone who you believe will be able to make you comfortable enough to be open and honest with them so that they can do the most work and bring the most benefit to your life. So I'm not going to tell people to not have a preference. But myself today, no, I don't have a preference, male or female.
All right. And I'm going to ask you to double down based on what you know, your homeboys, you personally, your family members, male family members coming up. Do mothers contribute to the emotional distress that a lot of men can carry in their hearts?
Um, yes, they do. But in my life, I've found that the absence of my dad, I think, has created more issues in my life personally than my mom. Um, I could go on both sides of it, whichever way you want me to take it. Just let me know. As far as my mom, I think as a kid, my mom had me when she was young. So I'm gonna be a little transparent. Hopefully she doesn't hate me for saying this. But my mom and dad, they were young when they had me. My mom was 17, my dad was 16. I grew up in the inner city of Columbus, Ohio. Um, it's safe to say because of their age, they didn't have the insight that was necessary to really raise me at that time. They were still finding themselves. So with my mom, um, I don't initially I didn't really feel the love that I think I needed from a woman at that age. And then my dad wasn't there to give me that structure, that discipline and guidance, or that image for me to reflect as a young boy growing into a man. So I would say it's a little bit of both. I know we a lot of times put a lot of things on women in the Black community, uh,
Mhm.
but I would say it was a balance of both.
All right, Jackson, when it
Yeah,
comes to you and the question, what are your thoughts? Do mothers contribute to the emotional distress that most men carry today?
I would go to say they can, and it's kind of like what the priest brother was saying. It's not that they do. I mean, it's like if depending on how you were raised. Because if you were raised in a single parent household, whether it's male or female, I don't subscribe to the notion that you can take credit without taking responsibility. So if you want to take credit for all of the positive things that you developed that young man and young woman into, I feel like you have to take responsibility for the negative that you didn't put in or that you may have exposed them to as well. Because, you know, if you were their model of what an adult should be, I just feel like you're on both sides of the coin. Now that's not to say that the missing mother or father didn't come up short, because they could definitely should have contributed, because it takes two. I mean, anybody who's a parent knows it's much easier to raise a child with a mother and a father, or in a dual parent household, whatever the genders may be. But it takes two, because one person, that's not a one person job. So I can't say that they black women or mothers or whatever in particular. I think it's a combination.
Thank you for that insight. Franks, you're up next. What you got?
Yeah, I think just like anything, it can and it can't. Again, it kind of what's been echoed here before already is that I think it takes having a father and a mother there. I think is critical for a young adult's well-being. I have young men that I work with that have father wounds, that their dad wasn't around, or their dad died at an early age, and the same thing moms. I've helped, you know, 6'3", 290-pound young men crying, who lost their mom, early. And so I think both of those can have an impact, so I don't think it's anything direct, but I think so much, I think it's both parties can have an impact, positive or negatively in a young person's life.
Thank you. That's very insightful. I think the audience agrees. You actually got somebody to share a little bit. Willette Smith says, my depression really took a major impact on me last year. And I am just really coming out of it. And my therapist worked really hard with me last year. And I have had a man when I was younger. Hey, kudos to you. Therapy works. Daryl Long, when it comes to emotional distress that most men can carry,
Hmm.
do you feel mothers have or can contribute to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a really, good relationship with my mother today, but growing up, I didn't. And for a lot of different reasons, she just really couldn't, she couldn't raise me the way that my father raised me. And my father was a married man, so I mean, there was a lot of different dynamics already that, me being a Virgo that I am, I question everything. Well, if my father's married, what, like what the hell is going on here, right? So, you know, the morals even then with just that little thing that they had did that created us, it set the scale for me to say, well, I guess if you guys can make your own morals, well, so can I. And that became a very, very, very dangerous game. Because as a young man, set in my own morals, I mean, Jesus Christ, that's why kids are running around with switches and guns today, right? Um, but I always examine for this question, Queen Sheba. I will always examine the life of DMX, Earl Simmons. And I always think about DMX because of his relationship with his mother specifically and how he alluded to it all the time, even up until his death, where he did a show. There's a therapist there, and he said that his mom never told him, not once in his life, that she loved him. And he burst out into tears. I still got this clip in my computer, but it always made me real sad because he was talking about how he bought her Benzes and he bought her house. And I mean, at one point he outsold Jay-Z. He was the number one rap artist for a while, but yet none of that was enough to make her proud of him. And it's crazy because, being as successful as he is, or he was, he still just wanted his mom's love. And the fact that that eluded him, in my opinion, men have very unhealthy coping mechanisms. We mentioned sex earlier. He cheated on his wife, multiple relationships, children don't know each other, multiple, like tens of them, right? And then the drugs. The drugs hit DMX very, very, very badly as far as coping mechanisms. You would see DMX in jail, no drugs, no access to drugs, speaking like a goddamn professor. He get out of jail, drinking, drugs, sex all over again, toxic, toxic, toxic. So I think the mother like very, very, very much plays a role. And I will also end my statement, my time on here. There was three young girls on a show called, I think her name is Ivania Savant. I think her show was titled Ilyana Saves My Life. I can never pronounce her name right.
Ayanla fixed my life.
There we go. She had a show, and I'll never forget it, with three young ladies. They had a father on there. His name was Martell, and the three young ladies had been told by their mother that they were
Sexually
abused.
assaulted. Yeah, I
I,
saw
Yeah,
I
that.
saw that. She told him that
Yeah,
he sexually abused them.
for
right.
all, like, yeah, and that ruined their relationship for like 25 years. And I believe, at least at that point, they still were suffering traumatically from those lies. So I would just use that as a case example to say that yes, mothers can very much dramatically um, mess up their children's lives, especially from a mental health standpoint. Because even watching that for me was triggering. So yeah, it's crazy.
I remember that episode, and then they did a lie detector test just to let you all know the outcome. They did a lie detector test, and he did not touch his daughters at all. But the mother had been touched in her past, so she was trying to push that narrative on her daughters because she didn't think that men or any man could possibly have a healthy relationship with young girls just because what had happened to her. So just to give you a little bit of context about that. But listen, you made me think of something that I want you all to take a look at it. I'm gonna read it over and then give me your thoughts on this. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and they will come forth later in uglier ways. Gentlemen, you just mentioned DMX and just those unsuppressed emotions. I mean, those suppressed emotions, right? With him not having his mother in his life. Anybody want to add or give your thoughts on men? And when men tend to internalize, what's the outcome of that?
Kind of reminds me of my Jack in the Box analogy. I definitely think it's true, and the outcome can often be, not just mentally uh, painful, but physically as well. But some people don't have the strength to go for help. And I think that's one of the major reasons why men lead in suicides and stuff like that, because we don't have the strength and the courage to ask for help. Because that's another stigma associated with receiving mental health is weakness, and no man wants to be considered weak. Regardless to how you cut it. Most men want to have an upstanding, strong exterior, and we tend to just we'll smother that issue until it just jumps up and fights out. It's like cornering an animal, and eventually they're going to come out fighting if you don't do something. So,
What are your thoughts, Frank, on men when men internalize those unexpressed emotions? What's the impact that it often does have on a man and can have?
Yeah, I think when I read that quote, it just kind of, I feel like in every man there's that element of that boy that is still in him, and that how his childhood was shaped, and was the environment safe? Did he trust the people that was around? um, because that critical stage, I feel like, goes with him the rest of his life. And so I think those wounds come out in different ways. I think they manifest in different ways. I think a lot of young behavior, what I see out of young men, what they identify as being a man is, hey, how many women they sleep with, how much money they make, what they do on the ball field. And I think a lot of that is based upon pain, because they're pursuing something to validate themselves or to validate their manhood, because there maybe wasn't a man in their life to validate them and tell them that, hey, you are enough exactly how you are. Hey, you are loved. You are special. You are a young king. And so I think all of us as guys, there's a little boy in us crying, maybe for some neglect or pain, that we experience as a young child, and it just manifests in different ways as an adult male.
This is some good stuff. Honorable Khalid, men who tend to, if men internalize, what impact does it have on him?
It goes back to what I said at the very beginning. It's the war inside, that so many of us are shunned from actually fighting. I think as men, we have to remember we're naturally problem solvers. So when you have those problems and those issues in your life and you put them on the back burner, it will eventually rear its head, and it may not be the way that you want it to be. Um, it's okay to have emotions, man. For the youngins out there, because so many of us were taught not to, we fight against it. But if you take the time to actually try to heal, you'll find that you'll be a much better man, a much better father, a much better husband. You'll be more of a support system for other people. And you probably won't feel like your back is against the wall at all times. So, man, people got to learn to heal, learn to let it go, and actually solve the problem instead of just sweeping it under the rug.
That's what's up. I would actually take two questions from the audience, but Daryl, go ahead. I want you to give this one a shot.
For me, I see it manifesting in a lot of different ways, mostly violent, mostly non-productive. But so we can get to the audience, I would just say it like this. I heard a quote, an African proverb, and it always stuck with me. It says, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. When I first heard this African proverb, it was applied to Eric Killmonger from the Black Panther, and I actually was rooting for him to win. I thought he represented at the time most young black men who feel like kings, who feel like something very important to us has been taken and stripped from us, and many of us is willing to act in a lot of different ways to get that back. It's just I think that we do it here instead of what he was doing, you know, in that movie, was going back to his homeland and doing whatever he needed to do to ascend to the throne, to ultimately, the first thing he did was say, "I'm gonna give vibranium to black people so they can stop suffering as well." I thought that was very, very, very sentimental. And he was willing to burn the world down. So not just his village. He was willing to burn the world down so that black man can feel, not just black men, I think all black people can feel embraced and be treated as the kings that he saw, that he felt we were. And that's how I feel as well. I think a lot of young black people who don't get a chance to speak their mind, they burn the village down around them until they become the big Meeches of my city. And then guess what? Everybody love them then. After they burn the city down, after the drugs, after the bodies, you know, they still show you more love than the hardworking janitor, the hardworking banker, the hardworking teacher. But it's interesting. That's all, Queen.
That, hey, I'm feeling it, and so is the audience. Janet Jenkins says, "Wow, that's powerful." Renaissance of Consciousness says, "Amen." I think we can utilize that to think about what's symbolic of what's going on in the Black community now. The drugs, the rap, even the rap, the young rappers. You're burning it down by the messages that you're sending, right? And it doesn't have to be in a physical sense, but in the mind, the body, the spirit. You know, all of those things. Teen pregnancy, the sex, I want to call it the sexual demons that have taken over our Black community, the things that we see by way of Instagram. Younger Black girls are willing to take off their clothes quicker than they ever have before, period. Right, to the point the men are saying it's not even attractive anymore. They are burning it down. So that's so powerful and so truthful. So thank you for sharing that. I want to take 2 audience questions, and what I want to do is assign them to you 2 by 2. Right? 2 of you will answer one, 2 of you will answer the other. All right. The first one is, do absentee fathers play a role in young men's mental and emotional development? Do they take on the mother's emotions? Khalid, I'm going to assign that one to you. And then I'm going to assign that one to you, Franks, because you work with a lot of young men from all backgrounds. Khalid, you sat up first because I feel like you're ready for this one. So I'm going to let you have the floor.
I think I have a little bit of experience with this one. So absolutely. Absent fathers do play a role. And I think a lot of times young men take on the emotions of their mother. And I'm going to be open and honest. I was one of them. I'm not going to even sit here and lie. Like I was overly emotional as a kid. And I think that was due to, like, if you all knew my dad is he's typically a cool, calm, collected person. But I find a lot of times, and we even see it on these panels, a lot of times women tend to be a little more emotional. You know, they may overreact a little sometimes. And I picked that up from my mom. It wasn't until I actually started to look inside of myself and see that I wasn't getting the results that I wanted, that I had the desire to change. Man, growing up with without a dad, it's tough for young boys. And I've seen it with a lot of the people in my area. Most of my friends grew up in single parent households, no fathers around. And when I say overly emotional, it doesn't mean that you're crying all the time. Sometimes you just wild out for no reason, or you may overreact. And a lot of times I've seen that happen in violent ways. And a lot of the people that I grew up around are either not here anymore or in prison as a result of it. I could tell story after story about that. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. One quick question for you.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to realize that you had taken on your mother's emotional display?
I think in my first real relationship, I think when I was about 19 years old. So my first time going to therapy was when I was 17. I knew I had a problem with various things I had been through. But when I was in my first real relationship at 19, man, me and that woman, we would go back and forth all the time. And after a while, I started to realize, you know, if she would yell, I would yell. You know, the louder she got, the louder I got. We were just going back and forth until I started to realize, you know what, if I could respond more calm, I could affect how she responded to the things that I was saying. And so from that point forward, you know, it's been a driving factor for me to hold my composure, you know, to stay, I don't want to say stay in character, but to approach every situation with a level of calmness so that, you know, because as men, if we're going to be leaders, we have to aspire to affect the way people react to the things that are going on. And so if I'm reacting like she's reacting, the problem never gets solved. So I would say probably around 19, 18, 19. That's when I realized I had a problem. And from there, I just put the work in to change it.
You said stay in character. Reminder, stay in kingdom, King.
Absolutely. I like
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Franks. Do absentee fathers play a role in young men's mental and emotional development? Do they take on the mother's emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think a absent father plays a tremendous impact on the young man, young woman's personal development. I think it takes that father figure, and as well as a mother figure, to having both of those individuals in a home to help provide balance and structure. I look at my own home life that there's times where my son may run to me, and there's times that he runs to his mother. There's times that daughters may run to me for emotional support, and they run to the mothers. But I definitely think not having that essence of the father around, not teach him, to help him, to embrace him, and to mold him, definitely has an impact. And I think just with the mom's part, I think there's so much to that. I mean, because the mom emotions can also be the absence of that male partner not around in her life as well too, and so it just kind of snowballs, that there's a void in both of their lives. And it may be a mother who's just doing all she can to hold the house down, and the stress of managing work and trying to take care of a kid and run a kid from point A to point B. I mean, that toll within itself has a tremendous stress. I mean, with a house of two parents, man, it's hard. I mean, it's hard parenting our kids. It's hard getting from point A to point B. And so I think all of that, yes, absent father definitely affects the emotional development of a young man. And I do think that the mothers, and whatever her experience may be, could have a negative impact on a young person's life, or man, it also could, have a tremendous a positive impact, where you see your mom step up to the plate, love, and to lead and to make the best out of that moment. And millions of moms have to have done that because men were absent in the home.
Yeah. Okay, God. So this leads me to a question real quick, and I want to try to go yes or no. And I was not going to ask this question, but you just said that women have had to step up in a home. And I'm coming to the other two guys with their specific question. This came through, and it says, do you believe, to the men on the panel, that a woman can teach a boy to become a man? Yes or no, gentlemen?
No.
Okay.
No.
Khalid,
No.
Franks.
I think there's attributes that she could teach. I think there's attributes that she can teach, but I think she would probably need the support of other men to help her son.
Okay. Jackson.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say no, but Frank's bringing on a good point about if you have some other type of influence, of course, because I grew up with a single mom, son, and I think I turned out pretty good. But I also know that I was missing something. I realized later in life that I was missing something because you very seldom do you know it in the moment. And you might know you want dad around, you might want mom around, but you don't know the lessons that you're missing in the moment. And so, having never seen a father figure or having a relationship, a positive relationship to emulate as a child growing up, you feel your way through these things and bump your head more often than not. And so yeah, my mom, she did a great job, but there was some tools missing. So that's why I say no initially. But a woman alone without the influence of some type of male, I don't think she can teach a young man how to be a young boy how to be a man without having a female perspective on everything.
Okay. Stay here, Rod, because I have the next question that's coming from the audience. Question to the men. How can I, as a future wife and mother, sister, aunt, support therapy to the men in my life? Basically, how can a woman support your mental health journey and the things that men deal with? Rod?
Me? No. Um, by not making a man feel less than for needing help. That is one. I mean, because you, in my opinion, and everything I'm saying, just from my perspective, I don't have any, statistical data to back it up. But from what I see, a lot of women will claim to want a man in touch with his feelings and, aware of, being sensitive and stuff like that. But they'll use those same attributes as a weapon against him if the moment, you know, suits them. And so you can't support me on one hand and use it as a tool against. I'm 1,000% sure that my last ex-wife used my love against me as a weapon.
That's
And,
deep.
and that tears a person up for many years. We all make mistakes in our relationships and we do things to hurt our partner. But when you do it intentionally, that takes another type of person. When your objective is to hurt that person, you're ruining that person. But you may feel like and maybe that's your objective is to ruin that individual. But you hit the nail on the head when you do that.
That's
And
deep.
it's
Frank,
hard when you
oh,
know
I'm
your love.
sorry.
No,
Sorry
I'm
about
just saying when you know your love that's been used against you, you're very skeptical in giving it out to someone else freely.
that's deep. Oh, Daryl came back. I was gonna give it to Frank's. Daryl, what are your thoughts? Uh, let me put it
Sorry,
back up here.
DoorDash came, and
That's okay. Get
got
your
some
food,
Subway
honey.
delivered and stuff, some
You
raspberry
gotta get
cookies and
that
stuff.
food. How
Especially like
can
when you smoking, Jesus. Anyway,
that's okay.
what's the question?
Question from the women to the men. They want to know, as women, how can we support as a future wife, whether it's a future wife, whether it's your mother, your sister, how can a woman support a man's mental health journey, be it therapy or anything else? How can women better support the men?
I think communication matters. I think, and so often, men and women, but let's just stick to the men. Men, sometimes we simply tell you what we need. We tell you what we need from you. And I think sometimes miscommunication it happens, and that can be very, very, very detrimental to me. I just love when people communicate in a healthy manner because when we communicate in a healthy manner, I can understand the intentions behind what we're trying to do. I can understand what's happening next. I can understand what we're supposed to be doing. But when we're not communicating healthy, when we're lying, when we're being deceitful, when we're being we're trying to be vulnerable, but then you use these different vulnerabilities against us. Those are the type of things that it make us not want to trust you, make us not want to talk to you. So in order to support therapy, I think it starts with just in the household. Can we just have healthy communications? Because that can be something alone that drives somebody to therapy. Because in my opinion, Queen, I've seen young men I grew up with that didn't have anybody in their household to teach them how to communicate healthy. So when they met somebody else, young daughter, and they tried to court her, yikes. Because there's going to come a time, and all the men can vouch for this, whether we're married or not, where you're going to have a spout or a fight with your girlfriend or whatever. And if you don't know how to communicate healthy, you're going to bury yourself in a deeper hole than you already were. And more than likely, you're going to push her into the arms of another man. So I think that to reinstate what I'm trying to say, healthy communication is what women can do to support therapy for Black men.
Thank you. Ladies, I hope you're listening because oh, well, you know what, Khalid and Franks, how can a woman better support if I didn't come to you? Khalid, I went to you.
Not for this question, but
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
um, how can a woman support a man's journey with
Mental
mental?
health, his emotional well-being, his even if it's not therapy, right? But how can a woman support the heart of a man?
Um, and I think what Jackson said was spot on. Being that open ear, but not utilizing a man's I guess flaws maybe against him, or uh his process of healing, his journey of healing, not using that against him. Um, I think so many times in a lot of these spaces, we expect men to not have emotions because we expect men to be strong. And there is strength in being vulnerable. There is strength in being open and honest. Uh, but for so many people, we are taught that a man being vulnerable is weak. So I think if women could kind of get under the notion of a man going through the process of healing as being strong, I think it would be a lot more beneficial, and men would trust in women a lot more if that was the case. So,
Whew, thank
And
you.
Queen, I think a lot of women do it, but the problem is when they use that same attribute as a weapon, like I was saying. Because when you have their support, we feel it. You know it's there, but you also when they use that against you, man, it's worse than never having it at all. You
I
you'd
think
rather
I've
do
done that
without
before.
you'd rather do without that support than to have someone use your vulnerabilities against you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think I've been guilty of that.
May I interject also?
Sure.
Different men are going to respond differently to that. And I'm being as soft spoken as possible, but there's some men who are going to be like, you know what, this person used my vulnerabilities against me. Let me walk away. That person, not stuff. That's they might beat themselves up, but there's going to be other men because they were raised in different environments, right? And they feel that sting of betrayal. Usually, that comes with a punishment for some of us, and that punishment has to be dealt out. I think, well, not always. Let me get that clear. It doesn't have to be dealt out, but for some men, they're going to feel like there has to be some punishment, and that's what black men don't want to admit. That speaks to our domestic violence cases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I only bring that up, Queen Sheba, because we bring up people like Shahrazad Ali and speak to how she spoke to black women being submissive, but she also spoke to the unhealthy ways that men communicate, and one of those ways is is violently. But that's all. That's all I want to interject and say.
No, that was powerful. Thank you. Definitely something for women to be made aware of, right? As they, encounter men and be mindful of how they communicate and what they communicate. Franks, what are your thoughts when it comes to women supporting men in their heart and their emotional journey?
Yeah, I think everything's been said has been spot on. I just being a safe place. I think just being a safe place where men can communicate their pain, their hurt, their worries, and not taking their insecurities or their pain or disappointments and using them as a weapon against them. A man is going to communicate more to you when he feels safe, and that you don't devalue him by sharing his weakness. I mean, because we all have weakness. We all have, and then we all have limitations. I mean, we, as much as men, we want to be supermans, we still have limits on what we can do, what we can accomplish mentally, emotionally, physically. And so, I mean, there is, and that's part of that is God's design, because it keeps us dependent on something that's greater than us. And so I just think just ultimately being a safe place where men can land their thoughts, and those thoughts do not take something that you use against him, as he was opening up and being vulnerable to you.
Ladies, are you listening? Whether you're a wife, girlfriend, soon to be wife, mother, sister, aunt, daughter, whatever you are, co-worker, all four of these men just gave you different aspects of how you can be more supportive of men that you engage with directly and or indirectly. Fellas, as we begin to wrap up, final thoughts. I want to stay timely here. Um, as you think about the things that men don't say, it reminds me of a song by Jay-Z. He said, I can't see the tears coming out my eyes, so I got to make the song cry. The things that you tuck deep in your heart, and women really have no idea, or other people really have no idea. Let's not just put it on women. People around you, when it comes to really knowing a man or a misconception about men, what are your final thoughts? What do you want to share with the audience or leave the audience with?
I would
I
say
guess
the men care a lot more than they give us credit for. We are not the demons or the dogs or the animals that they portray us to be. A lot of us are broken. A lot of us are untrusting. But just because we don't put our emotions on the table doesn't mean that they aren't there. So don't treat a man like a doormat just because he doesn't open up to you. Realize that man has a heart, he has feelings, and they can be hurt just as easily as yours.
Thank you. They do care, ladies, and they do feel.
I think I'll leave mine on this by saying, I think that we just need to have better coping mechanisms when it comes to our hurt, our pain, and dealing with our trauma. And when it comes to vulnerability, because it's sitting on me, a lot of men are going to harden themselves harder than they already were. And that's something that we don't need because that's counterproductive, if I'm being honest. Um, I would suggest to a lot of people try to let any hurt go, especially if it's not something if it's something that you can control, let it go. But as far as the misconceptions with the men, black men especially love black women. We care about y'all mental health. We care about postpartum depression. We care about mortality rates. A lot of us do. So I would suggest that you guys maybe start to focus on those men and maybe uplift those men and put those men like Queen Sheba did today with Chauncey Jackson and Khalid. I didn't know those men. So maybe, you guys are the missing link. The women should be, not talking about some of these assholes online and just focusing on the guys who really actually care about y'all. I think that's something that I would leave with, to be honest.
I like that. Stay on the realm of reality
Hmm.
and focus on the men that are really pouring out and pouring into you and those
Yeah.
around you. Franks.
Yeah, I think just final thought as we start this conversation about mental health. I mean, I think it starts with us individually, examining our own mental health, because I think we, when you are healthier, you're going to attract yourself to individuals that are healthy as well too. And I think taking time to making sure that you are healthy as an individual and those who are around you, be open, have the conversation that there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, when our car needs a tune up, we take it in to get looked at. When there's something, a leak in our house, we call a plumber. Nothing, these bodies are not made to last forever. So there's nothing wrong with getting checkups and getting people to come alongside you to help you navigate hurt, pain that you may be harboring, from your childhood. And so I would just say, make mental health normal. Make it normal in your family conversations, holidays conversations, checking in on men, and make the men that you care about and love, help them to feel safe. That, if that's getting around other men that can speak into his life, if that's getting therapy, but help them by speaking into them and help shepherding them, because a woman's touch and kindness is so powerful. A woman's essence in a man's life is so powerful. And so you have an abundance of strength that can help shape a man who may be going through a difficult time by just a gentle touch, gentle words to help guide him to a place that can really help this individual out.
I'm listening. I'm taking mental notes as each of you speak. And I purposely saved the youngest one for the last because oftentimes on panels, the youngest one have to go first. But Khalid, I'm going to let you go last, King. What you got for us?
My final thoughts. There are three main areas in my life that I've taken a lot of time to work on over like the past 10 years. Number one, uh, strengthening my relationship with the Creator, God. Everybody comes from a different background. I'm Muslim, so we say Allah, but we all come from something at the end of the day. The sooner people can find out what the truth is in that, the easier it will be to strengthen your purpose and your identity. And those are the other two areas that I've really focused on establishing, following my purpose. From the Muslim perspective, we're taught that our purpose is to worship the Creator in everything that we do. So when I further that to my identity, I try to carry myself like a Muslim. I speak calm, I speak confidently, I try to move with respect, honor, and integrity. I try to treat the people who are around me the way that I would want to be treated. If you could focus on those three areas, how'd you get here? what's your purpose and who are you, I think you'll find that you'll be able to be a lot more mentally healthy. And so to the women, if you're trying to help your man or trying to help your son or whatever the case may be, if you can help them get on the path to solving those issues in their lives, I think you'll be able to do a lot of justice. And that's all.
This has been a hell of a conversation. I really feel like y'all have, listen, my mood has been enlightened. You know what I'm saying? I'm ready for Monday, come what may. Thank you all for pouring into this audience. You never know who's out there that needs a good word. And I really felt like each and every one of you brought a very dynamic and unique perspective when it comes to men and mental health. I want to continue this conversation. So in the next month or so, I'm going to come knocking on your doors again, because I really want to go deeper with this. If you would love to come back. JT Casanova, thank you, King, for the super sticker. Thank you. I appreciate it. But thank you all for tuning in. It's Sunday. Go enjoy your green beans, your collard, what is it? Your collard greens, your cornbread, all of those good C words, neck bones, ham hocks, whatever you got.
Absolutely.
On the stove. And God bless you all. Thank you, gentlemen. We really appreciate you here in the palace. Take care.
Just
Take
know
care.
I took notes from the other kings, and that was some good information. So it wasn't just for the audience. It was for some of us in the room as well.
I agree. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Y'all take
Bye-bye.
care. God bless.
Have a good one.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.